Hello there, it's Friday, which means it's time, once again, for the best movie podcast ever. The only? Maybe we'll do an Undertaker-themed episode, and this will be the only movie podcast that offers objective and hyperbole-free discussion. My Undertaker! Of every movie in the known universe. I apologise for this introduction. It's already gone off the rails. I am your host, the podcaster with no name, not Paul Bearer, but Konrad. And with me, as always, he emits a low-amp wang pulse. It's Anthony James.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
How you doing, Anthony?
It's been a while since I said that one. Very, very well. I enjoyed that little sort of Undertaker sidetrack there.
I brought out the Paul Bearer impersonation. I've got that one tucked away. That one's in the back pocket, always ready to come out.
Just to let you know, guys, do listen to the end, because I will be signing off this week with Rest in Peace. That'll be happening. It will happen. See you in about 45 minutes to see it.
I can't wait for that. I'll have forgotten by then, because I'll be too busy keeping this train on the road. On the road? On the rails.
I'll forget too. Don't worry.
Well, I mean, for those of you who have heard my introduction to Anthony there, and like a low amp wang pulse, what kind of ridiculous non-actor would say that? The answer, of course, is Charles Dance, and we're going to be space trucking with him and two of our favourite allies in a lesser known, that was a Red Hot Chili Peppers reference for you there, in a lesser known Stuart Gordon romp, and that is saying something if you know who Stuart Gordon is. We've got some chat about Denis Villeneuve annoying the internet by having some things to say about Marvel movies, and we've got a gritty as hell Back to the Future. So I say, let's talk about some gosh darn movies.
Let's do it.
Movies. Dune is one of them. Denis Villeneuve directed it. Honestly, it's getting hard to keep up. Now, I'm going to admit something to you here, listeners and viewers. I have just said to Anthony in confidence that I actually agree with Denis Villeneuve on this one. So, you know, I'm putting my hands to the fire, or my feet to the fire, whatever the saying is. But Anthony, you don't know anything about this. Perhaps our listeners don't either, so I'll take you through what has transpired with our man, Denis. So the Dune director has drawn the ire of the internet, which, let's be honest, isn't that hard in this day and age, when he said the following in an interview with, I think, Spanish newspaper El Mundo, which I think means the world, if I'm not mistaken. So he had this to say. Perhaps the problem is that we are in front of too many Marvel movies that are nothing more than cut and paste of others. Perhaps these types of movies have turned us into zombies a bit, but big and expensive movies of great value, there are many today. I don't feel capable of being pessimistic at all. Now, the first thing I'll say is he was speaking, I believe he was speaking... no, actually, he's French-Canadian, so I don't think he would have been speaking in Spanish, but it was an interview conducted for a Spanish newspaper, so I doubt they were speaking English. Perhaps they were speaking French. But I mean, okay, I'm.
What's the point he's making, Konrad, here? Like, okay, it's just because his film didn't make as much money.
No,
as
so, I mean, Dune hasn't come out yet, and in fact, Dune is actually, by all accounts, making a huge amount of money in the international regions where it is out. I think his point that has been slightly misconstrued in all of this is that he was asked a question, as a lot of auteur directors are these days. A journalist wants to get them to sort of say something that maybe puts them in hot water with the Marvel crowd, because that gets clicks. And it happened to a certain extent with Martin Scorsese and Patty Jenkins quite recently, and I think this is an example of that. I think his point, when you read the actual full interview, is that I think this is actually reasonable. I think he says that the majority of Marvel movies are kind of built to the same framework. They're kind of, not to say they're not good movies, but they're kind of copy and pasted. And I think that's fair. I think a lot of the people who direct Marvel movies aren't going to be a James Gunn or a Taika Waititi or hopefully like a Chloe Zhao, like someone who brings enough of a clear artistic direction to the project that they're able to kind of push it in their own direction and do things they want to, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad movies. I do think there is a framework to them, and that is what he's kind of pointing at and saying maybe that's why people are getting a bit sick of big budget mainstream movies. But I think the thing that's been lost in all of this is that Denis Villeneuve does, in the second part of this, very clearly say, no, he's really positive about big budget movies. There's still lots of great ones coming out. So I think this is a case of people being a little trigger happy let's say. What do you think? What's your initial read on this?
Well, obviously, we have to take this into account as well. Like, for Patty Jenkins, I sort of gave her the benefit of the doubt because like I said, it's all been like she was being hyperbolic. So with Denis Villeneuve, I have to assume that they are like playing this up for clicks and playing this up for drama. Now, I'm not gonna lie, like to a certain extent, yes, of course, Marvel films follow a pattern and they follow a structure. Unfortunately, most films do. Is the thing, and if we're gonna start getting hung up on the idea that films, especially genre films, all sort of seem the same. Now, maybe it is a bit more cookie cuttery. Maybe if we are gonna get hung up on that, then I've got a lot to say about a lot of films because I noticed the same pattern in every single film I watch, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I understand they're all come from the same place and they're all about a superhero, and the superhero genre maybe is a bit diluted at the minute. I can see the point. Like, I'm not completely disagreeing with him, and I know that he wouldn't have talked about this unless he was asked about it. Like I know that. So
I think you are right though. I think the criticism of Marvel movies, and I say this as someone who has been pretty outspoken that I need Marvel movies to be really good to get me into them. Otherwise, I get a bit bored. But I think they are victims of their own success to a certain extent, because if you look at, I've literally just released the first instance of our Bad Guy Breakdown series, and that's looking at a James Bond movie. James Bond movies ain't changed that much in the last 50 years. Like, I think it's fair to say.
I was thinking the same.
There's
not 3 of them a year.
That is the problem. Is that they're not dominating the mainstream movie cycle in the same way that Marvel movies are, which isn't. I guess you can lay the blame at Disney for that and say, hey, maybe make less better movies or less but slightly more distinct movies. But ultimately, I think criticizing each individual movie for the kind of ubiquity of the media landscape, or Marvel across the media landscape as a whole, is a little unfair. And I'm looking forward to the Eternals and what's Taika Waititi working on at the moment? Is he still doing Akira? I think we talked about that the other day.
Yeah, he's also doing the Reservoir Dogs TV show, and he's doing Thor: Love and Thunder.
He's doing the new Thor.
But I will say, he's doing the new Thor. I will say, Konrad, to be honest with you, like, I get the point, and like when he's asked about it, he'll give his opinion, which I don't necessarily disagree with. Having said that, when you just take a step back, I'm not going to defend Disney. Obviously, I'm not.
They don't need defending.
You think three a year is probably too many. Maybe 2 a year would be better. Or even one a year. But the thing is,
make it a tentpole.
Yeah.
I suppose if you did one a year, it would have taken us, like, we would have died of old age before we got like the second Avengers movie.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The style of the storytelling they're doing, like they are sort of bringing the style of the comic books into the films, where there's so many of them and they're all interlinked, and I do appreciate that. What they're doing with it, I completely understand, and I could actually see it. Obviously, Disney's going to drive for more and more and more and more. Of course they are, but I can also see why a comic book nerd who would plan their films out would do it this way too. So I think it's interesting, and the reason why they've maybe been so successful is because it is what Disney wants for the money, but it's also what diehard comic book fans want for the basically like the huge interlocking stories that they can get that way. Now with the new TV series, maybe they'll sort of go back to about 2 a year. I don't know what they'll do.
It will be interesting with Disney's kind of shift to this more streaming based model in the last year. Yeah. Whether that is just a pandemic thing or whether it marks a kind of demarcation point for their business model going forward. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, yeah, I think there you go. We've all agreed. Marvel movies are cut and paste. We're all signed off on that, co-signed. If Marvel movies are cut and paste, I know one director whose movies most definitely are not, and it's this next person. And we're going to see if Anthony can figure out who they is in the return of Back to the Future. There you go.
Celebrate good time. Come on!
We're sticking to 1995 this week. I've decided I make the rules here, and I've said.
So it's not space truckers then.
Well, what year did hold on, let me just check. Has it ever...
96.
Oh
96,
wow!
96.
Imagine if it had been Space Truckers. No, I'll give you that. That one's a freebie. It's not Space Truckers. Hello and welcome to the exciting game show feature where I have selected a movie from normally 25, last couple of weeks, 26 years ago today. Anthony will have 5 opportunities to guess the name of the film. He'll hear 5 clues, and each clue he hears will lower his score by 1. And please play along at home. Anthony, are you ready for this week's Back to the Feature?
I am, but before I say I'm ready, I've never actually noticed before that you do the back. It's interesting that you're like, are you the only person in the world who does backwards scoring? Like, you give me all the points, and then I lose them for wrong answers, rather than giving me points.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
answers.
that's the kind of charitable person I am. I push all the chips across to your side of the table, and I say, "That's yours.
Yeah,
that's yours." But then I say, "Now listen, you've got to answer some questions to get out of here alive," and I start pulling them back. It's quite.
All right,
it's quite Machiavellian, right?
I'm ready to risk my life.
Okay, so the chips are in front of Anthony here. The lights are down. Let's play Back to the Feature. Clue the first. The opening credits of this movie, a slideshow of notebook pages set to a remix of Nine Inch Nails' Closer, was rushed through at the last minute to replace a scene in which Morgan Freeman's character buys a house in the country as they no longer had the budget to shoot it. I've given you a lot there.
You've given me an awful lot. And you said that the director was he liked cookie cutter things?
No, I said he absolutely doesn't make cookie cutter movies.
Okay.
I've just told you it's a he as well, which is a mistake on my
part. Well, to be honest with you, it's 95.
Yeah, in the 90s they weren't letting women make mainstream movies.
Yeah.
Apart from Catherine Bigelow.
Okay, so
basically Catherine Bigelow was the only one in Hollywood who was allowed to make movies in the 90s.
Yeah, that has changed for the better, of course. Let me think now. Morgan Freeman. Deep Impact? No, it's not, but
It's a good guess. It's not right. Deep Impact did star Morgan Freeman as the president, I believe, in Deep Impact.
Yeah, not God this time, but the president.
No, but a similar all-seeing, powerful figure that he often plays. Okay, clue the second. This one might be giving it away too early. I'm interested. When I wrote this, I wasn't sure. Clue the second. Brad Pitt considers this to be one of the most perfect movies he has ever made. There's going to be people at home screaming the answer now.
Bradley Pittles.
Yep.
I've never seen this film, but I do know what it is.
Go on.
Do I know how to pronounce it is another thing.
There won't be any points unless it's pronounced correctly.
Yeah. I'm going to go with S7N.
Yeah, that is correct. S7N, David Fincher's hit thriller. It is this movie. Wow, what a return to form for Anthony there.
Thank you.
You
said you just said David Fincher.
David Fincher.
That's David Fincher's Fantastic Fincher.
Yep, absolutely. We should just talk like this from now on, just in spoonerisms. Yes, of course, it is S7N or 7 if you're nasty. It's a David Fincher classic. I'll go through the other clues because there's some great ones in here. I thought the Brad Pitt one might have been too early. That was my fear. I hold my hands up and say, well, clearly that was the case because Anthony got it without even seeing this movie.
It was either that or Thelma and Louise.
Did David Fincher direct Thelma and Louise?
No, I didn't know David Fincher.
I feel like someone. I might have been.
Brad Pitt did.
Someone.
I might have been Ridley. Lovely young man.
It might have been Ridley Scott who directed Thelma and Louise. I'm looking it up now. It was Ridley Scott. Yeah, I knew it was someone famous. Okay, so the third clue would have been this movie marked director David Fincher's real move away from adverts and music videos after he briefly returned to doing them after his previous and first feature, Alien 3. So David Fincher was primarily...
I didn't know he did Alien 3.
Yes, yeah, he was primarily a music video director, and then Alien 3 was a very troubled production. Went through several directors, several scripts, several ideas about what the movie was going to be, and eventually they're like, I don't know, get the guy who did the Madonna video to make this. And they brought him in, and I like Alien 3. It's not nowhere near as good as the first two, but it's not bad in the grand scheme of things. But you have to treat it as its own separate thing. That, like, Newton and Corporal Hicks are still alive, as far as I'm concerned, in the true canon of Alien. Fourth clue. And I hasten to add a warning to this, that I am going to have to mention a real dickhead's name in this clue, but it was an interesting point, so I'm going to do it. Val Kilmer was considered to be for the role of John Doe before it was finally given to Kevin Spacey. In retrospect, should have gone to get Val Kilmer, I guess. And the fifth clue, the infamous "What's in the Box" sequence to close out this movie came about as a result of a mistake by New Line Cinema, who had rejected that ending initially. It was part of an earlier draft. They'd rejected it, but they accidentally included it in the script they sent to David Fincher while asking him to direct, so they had to honour it. which, considering it's the most famous scene in the whole movie, is quite funny.
Don't tell me what it is, because I've never seen the film.
What's in the bags? That's for you to figure out. They never show you. They just
once I've seen this film, that's going to change my life, because what's in the box for me, it reminds me of any Australian listeners, let me know. There was an Australian TV show for kids called What's in the Box. It was like, what's in the box today? And there was always something different in the box. That's what my memory of What's in the Box is.
No,
so we'll see what happens after I watch
That's exactly the same as what happens in 7. It's
little
almost shot for shot. Yeah, a remake of that. So speaking of things in boxes, this is probably about the most natural segue that we've ever gotten on this show. Things in boxes. This time round, it's not, and I am going to spoil it, it's not Gwyneth Paltrow's head. It's some killer robots in Stuart Gordon's weird, just strange movie, Space Truckers, the movie that we watched this week. It is, of course, Space Truckers.
I mean, fantastic film.
Okay, so I'm gonna lead off with something here. Like, I'm a big Stuart Gordon fan. I don't know if you've necessarily seen any of his movies before, Anthony, because
I don't think I have.
So he basically made Reanimator, he made From Beyond, and then he made Robot Jocks with which is like a kind of America versus Russia sort of Cold War takeoff where people fight in giant robots, and they're all very cheesy. They all feel quite a lot like this movie, and they're all like famous for having really great practical effects and gore, and they're all produced. Actually, I'm not sure if Robot Jocks was, but Reanimator and From Beyond were produced by a guy called Brian Yuzna, who would go on to make crazy films on his own, like Society. But they're all very kind of they're all kind of like schlocky horror movies, basically. And this was his last. The Space Truckers, that is, was like his last hurrah as a director, really, because he kept on working after this, but if you look at his career before and after this, you can see that there was sort of that 10-year stretch between Reanimator and this where he was making stuff that was good, if low budget, and then after this it seems to have just fallen off a cliff. Just a gut reaction after seeing this movie.
After this it fell off.
After this, yes, that's right. Gut reaction after seeing this movie. Are you more or less likely to watch a Stuart Gordon movie after seeing your introduction to him through Space Truckers?
I'm more likely to watch another one. I'm going to be honest with you. This is the exact type of film that I obviously I like all films. We know me, but this is like the type of film when I really think to myself, if I was to make a movie, what type of movie would I make? I would want to make something like this, where it's set in space, but like, you know, have gravity boots, which are literally just studs on the bottom of a shoe. Like, I love the production design.
We'll get into that.
I love the story. I to be honest with you, even like how cheesy and how on the nose the whole thing is, I could even forgive it for the main thrust of the narrative being how sexy a woman is.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
There are some fairly poorly aged sections of this movie or themes of this movie. I'll say that now. But I absolutely know what you mean. For those of you who haven't seen this, it's like this is a movie that lives and breathes its setting. It's like it's a throwback.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like joyously a throwback. Like there were scenes. There's a scene very early on in this movie where Dennis Hopper's character has delivered some square pigs to a
they're great.
and they are literally
pigs.
just practical square pigs in square cages, all practical effects. They look ridiculous, and I believe it's Norm from Cheers. I can never remember the actor's name, but Norm from
I just call him Poor Man John Goodman.
Yeah, that's
Goodman.
fair. That is fair. So poor man's John Goodman tries to stiff Dennis Hopper for some money, and he's brought a couple of heavies with him. Dennis Hopper delivers an awful stage punch to one of them, and they're in 0G, and they flip backwards, and you can just see the wires. You can just see the wires. Like, they're not even remotely hidden. And it really does remind me of that sort of like pulpy 50s sci-fi. Like, I think it's very deliberately done. I mean, obviously, you know, they probably could have concealed the wires, but I think it got to a point where they're like, nah, just leave them in. I absolutely love them. You know, we talked about the Matrix sequel coming out last week. This puts the Matrix to shame, doesn't it? Like these kind of wire fighting effects.
Well, to be honest with you, I think you've got more chance of someone missing the wire than you do someone, like, you know, not realizing that it's all CG and the Neo spin around a pole kicks Agent Smith in the face scene. Everyone knows that's CG. Yeah. Whereas this, if you look at the wrong way for a second, you don't see the wire, it all works.
And it's all there. You know it's all there in the camera. There is a definite charm to that, I think.
There really is, and even like when they're out floating in space, the background is just a black sheet with lights.
It's great. It's so bad. Like, it's literally there's so many stars in space in this, because like they do like close-ups of Dennis Hopper, and you can see like 100 lights just behind his head on a close-up. And it's like, how is there ever nighttime in this part of space with this much light pollution coming from the stars?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest though, Conrad. I think I would try and do it a slightly better quality. But if I was gonna make a space film, having seen this now, I think even low-budget filmmakers, really, like we're talking micro-budget filmmakers, I think they would still try to utilize a green screen if they were filming in space like that. Having said that, I think because when you do a low-budget green screen, it's really hard to get the lighting right. It doesn't look quite right. I honestly think that if you just put a bit more time into it, that's the way to go for a micro-budget film in space. I really do, because I think in the camera, if you actually made the background look a bit more realistic, then it would look far better, in my opinion, than a micro-budget green screen.
No, I mean, this movie uses a really refreshingly large number of miniatures, I think, and you compare this to something like, I don't know, the Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy, where that was all done with miniatures in boxes, essentially, with matte paintings for the space background. You're absolutely right. You know, if it's practical, as long as you spend the time doing it, like in this, it literally looks like someone has just poked a load of holes in a piece of black cloth and hung it in front of a softbox, and they're like, I don't know, that's space.
Yeah.
Spend a bit more time doing it, and you can absolutely come up with something that looks just as good as a green screen. I think a lot of the concerns about that in the modern day come down to money and time, unfortunately, because it's cheaper to just do it with the green screen. But talking about the miniatures, there was an interesting fact that I came up with when I was, and I'll be interested to see if you drew this comparison as well. So I'll say the comparison first. Do you wonder if this film's visuals specifically had any influence on Luc Besson for The Fifth Element?
That's a good point. Actually, that's a good point. Perhaps it has the same sort of homemade feel to some of the costumes.
It's like a vibrancy to everything, I feel. Like
vibrancy.
Everyone's wearing bright colours and crazy outfits.
Yeah, I think I actually read somewhere like that. This is such a good comparison, but like I think maybe even Gordon himself compared, like when he listed off like what he thought this was, it was something like Alien mixed with Hook.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
That's great. Yeah, that is spot on for what this is, because it does. We'll get into the plot spoilers and the actual plot stuff shortly, but tonally, it has the silliness of Hook. But yeah,
silliness, huge amount of silliness.
Absolutely, yeah. So I was looking for people that actually worked on both Fifth Element and Space Truckers, and there's only one guy, a guy called Paul Gentry, who did the miniature effects on both. So if there was an influence, it was purely in watching it and then applying it rather than crew moving from one to the other.
Yes. I will say as well, though, Conrad, the Luc Besson was inspired by the comic book Valerian
yeah.
for Fifth Element, which he eventually made as well. He eventually made Valerian, but that's where the inspiration comes from as well. So there might be some crossover there as well.
I remember you covering that on this very podcast. But I mean, talking about Stuart Gordon saying this was sort of a crossover between Hook and Aliens, the production design on this was largely done by an Englishman called Simon Merton, and you're going to love this when I talk about the other movies that he had worked on before this. See if you can spot the influence in these. So you've got Super Mario Brothers, the movie, also starring Dennis Hopper, and then Tank Girl, which has very similar. I don't know if you've ever seen Tank Girl, but very similar kind of punky aesthetic. And this does feel like someone has just like kind of taken those weird dystopian sci-fi elements of Super Mario Brothers and then splashed some pink and green neon paint on them and stuck it in space, basically.
It's just so great. I think it really does feel like these days the equipment that you could have. It kind of feels like someone's like university film that they had to make, but they just like ran out of time and they were like, fuck it, let's just make it truck into space,
I mean, it's lucky that Stuart Gordon had a hand in writing the screenplay. So it was Ted Mann who actually wrote the screenplay, but Stuart Gordon came up with the story idea, because if this was written by someone and then handed to a director to create, you could imagine that there would be violence in that room when it happened. Like, are you trying to sabotage my career by getting me to make this ridiculous movie?
I will say as well, right? Who's the guy? Okay, Charles Dance is obviously in this, and he's in Game of Thrones. Now, in Game of Thrones, there's another fellow who played the High Sparrow, Jonathan
Pryce.
Jonathan Pryce, yes, and I have seen him in Shakespeare in the Globe in London, but he's a very, very good actor. But Jonathan Pryce looks down on Game of Thrones as just like jibber jabber that he had to do to get some money.
He's got the old Alec Guinness with Star Wars opinion, where it's like,
So for some reason in my what did Alec Guinness say?
Alec Guinness was always. I mean, he was a different generation, let's say, but Alec Guinness was very much like, I'm just doing this silly swords and sandals thing to pay the bills, and then it turned out to be the thing that everyone knows him for, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's like, so Jonathan Pryce sort of is doing a similar thing with Game of Thrones, but because of that, the other sort of older English actors that were in Game of Thrones, I can't help but divorce that Jonathan Pryce feeling away. So Charles Dance, unfortunately, in my mind, gets labeled with that same problem, and then I see him in this. Part of it, I have to stop myself going. I'm just like, oh my god, I was so wrong about Charles Dance.
He's having the time of his life in this movie, I think it's fair to say. And it's really interesting you bring up the Game of Thrones comparison, because there are a surprising number of Game of Thrones actors in this. So you've already got, obviously, Charles Dance plays a scientist who then comes back in a different role that we'll get into in a moment. You've also got Tim Lone, who played one of the White Walkers in Game of Thrones, and you've got Ian Beattie, who played Meryn Trant. Both Tim Lone and Ian Beattie were just some of the soldiers at the beginning who are slaughtered.
So actually,
but I mean, this is like a training camp.
Makes a lot of sense
for Game of Thrones actors.
Well, do you know what? Do you know why, Konrad?
Go on, I don't.
Because this film was filmed in County Wicklow, Ireland. That's why.
Unbelievable. There we go. We've come full circle.
Yeah, it was filmed in County Wicklow, Ireland, and it was filmed there because of the tax breaks. As we all know, Ireland is a tax haven. That's why like Amazon and Google and everyone has offices there. But basically, it was filmed there for tax breaks, and then apparently I read. Now, this is not spoilers, but the last scene was meant to take place in the desert. But it took place on a beach because they literally are no deserts in Ireland.
Damn it, this land is too verdant. Where are the deserts?
Yeah.
That's great. That's amazing. I didn't realise it was filmed in Ireland, but that makes perfect sense as to why there's a bunch of British and Irish actors in this who...
There's a Northern Irish woman who plays sort of like the woman down the toilet bowl. You know that woman? They go down the toilet and there's a woman down there.
Amazing, yeah.
She's Northern Irish.
That, I mean, that scene, we've got to, I'm not, it's not really spoilers to talk about it, but that scene where they sneak into, they're running away from a crime, they sneak into a women's bathroom, they open one of the doors, and there's this like old woman yelling at them to get out, and Dennis Hopper, without blinking, walks in and just yanks her head open, and it turns into a keypad that reveals a secret lift down to like a black market arms dealer or whatever. It's just, that's how you introduce the plot of your movie, folks. That's how Marvel movies should be doing that.
That was good.
That was okay.
Good.
I think it's now time for us to, in earnest, talk about spoilers in this, because there are so many things to discuss in this movie, and we're going to have to spoil it to do so. So if you haven't seen it, this is your warning to skip ahead to the end. And there's literally nowhere that we could start apart from with Charles Dance's Macanudo scene. He's killed, also we think, in the opening scene. He's the scientist who invents the killer robots, who are the main threat of the movie, I guess. And then Dennis Hopper's crew are what's the word when pirates kidnap you? I can't remember what the word is now. Not boarded. I don't know what word I'm looking for. Well, their ship's they're taken prisoner anyway by
commandeered.
Sure, that's not the word I was looking for, but
commandeer.
Parley. No, that's definitely not the word. But they're taken prisoner by pirates, and all the pirates look like extras from Mad Max. You've got Bennett from Commando briefly shows up. He's an Australian man. He still has the same moustache he had 10 years ago. And then you see Charles Dance, and he is a cyborg space pirate with one leg who appears to be sort of cosplaying as an SS officer. And it is one of the coolest things I've ever seen Charles Dance do, because this is a man who I'm fairly sure has played quite significant Shakespearean roles, and here he is, just presumably having the time of his life. How did you feel about the introduction of the Macanudo character?
Right, I'm going to be honest with you.
Go on.
I thought in the first scene that Charles Dance was already hammy enough. Yes. In the first scene when he was just his normal British self. And then he comes back as a man who's half human, half electric, chemical robot man.
He rebuilt himself.
He rebuilt himself. Okay, if he had to rebuild half his brain, I don't know how that worked, but we'll just go with it. I like that. There's a lot of innuendo in this scene. We'll just say.
Yes, you could say so. The low amp wang pulse comes back in the like. He essentially says that he'll consider letting them off easy if Debbie Mazar's character has sex with him, and it.
No, that was her idea.
It was her idea. That is true. But then proceeds one of the funniest non-sex scenes I've ever seen, where Charles Dance is essentially offering her every drug and substance to help her relax under the sun, while guaranteeing her that his body is built for female pleasure. And then it stayed with me all these years. I saw this movie when I was probably about 10 years old the first time I saw it, and I remembered nothing about it apart from Charles Dance unsuccessfully revving his cyborg penis as like one of those, like, they're not slide whistles, the things that you would like blow and they go like that. It essentially makes that noise, which if you rebuilt your penis from scratch, why would you put that in there? Like, why would you introduce it?
Why would you not?
You want it to be like a kind of masculine sound. You don't want to compound your embarrassment by having wee as you're like trying to get the penis going.
I would be happy with that. To
it's
be honest
so
with you.
good.
I will say Debbie Mazar, right? Now I know her as the bad guy from was it Beethoven 2, I think.
Oh, okay.
I
don't think I saw.
So I know her from a few different things. She is sort of one of those faces that sort of we said earlier on, we've got the poor man's what do you say? We got the poor man's John Goodman. She's sort of the poor man's sort of Fran Drescher, or the poor man's
who's Stephen Dorff?
Janice. The poor man's what do you call it? Janice from Friends or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
But she you know what I mean? Like, she's sort of like the New York, very thick New York accent. I will say, okay, let's just get this out of the way now. The main thrust of no pun intended, of this storyline is just that she's really good looking.
Yeah.
And multiple men want to be with her. So therefore, in order to marry her, she's agreed if someone takes her to Earth, they'll marry her. And then another guy comes along who wants to be with her too. And then Charles Dance wants a bit of her. And for half an hour of the film, she's just in her underwear.
Yeah.
It was interesting, I'll say. Now, I did say that the film was so wacky and over the top and crazy that it got away with it really for me. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it does get away with it as playful. I mean, there's moments. There's moments in the scene where Charles Dance's character is reintroduced, where Dennis Hopper is kind of making fun of him, and then when confronted, he says things like, "No, I think you deal with your disability very bravely," and stuff, which is really funny. Even in like, I mean, that scene had me like laughing out loud. But you're absolutely right that it has a tightrope to walk, I think, and
yes,
I don't think it does it as successfully with the kind of the romance or the love triangle. I don't think it does that as successfully as it does with Charles Dance's character.
No, it doesn't. I agree with you, but they do throw little bits in that show me that it isn't like, obviously, you know, when they conceived of this film, this pulpy mess of a film, they thought it would be great to have a good-looking woman in her underwear for half an hour. Of course they did, but at the same time, they do have little crumbs in there to make you think that actually there's crumbs of good messages. Like, for example, the fact that she doesn't actually go through with it and she ends up getting the best of him. The fact that it's her idea, like she takes control of her own body for the plan. The young fella who wants to be with her is like sort of trying to fight on her corner, and Dennis Hopper's just like, listen, she knows what she's doing. Like, she can do what she wants. You know? I thought that was actually quite respectful to me.
I think Dennis Hopper's a lot, as much as the love triangle was ridiculous, because Dennis Hopper is clearly like 40 years older than this woman.
Didn't matter at the end.
We'll come back to that in a second. That was like like a classic pantomime bit of storytelling where it's like, oh no, this guy has he's kind of honourably yielded the floor to his younger rival so they can go off and get married, but never mind, here's an almost as young woman who we've introduced in the final act of this movie purely for the purposes of marrying Dennis Hopper so he and her can walk hand in hand to accept their applause at the end. It was ridiculous, but I mean he is very. It's odd because he's saying, "Oh, if you marry me, I'll take you to Earth," which is not the strongest foundation for a relationship. I'm going to say, But he's fairly respectful of her as an individual, which is it's an interesting performance. As I say, I think the love triangle is ridiculous and kind of unnecessary. I think I would have preferred it of him being like a father figure. And honestly, I thought when they introduced this idea of her having a mother who was in cryosleep and he had these like reactions to pictures of her mother, I was like, oh, did he like sleep with her mother like 20 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever? And it turns out that she's his daughter or something like that. That would be an interesting twist. And then at the end of the movie, it's just like, nah, she's not his daughter, but he's just gonna marry her mum anyway.
yeah. I got a girl on ice. I got her on Earth. She's on ice for me, waiting. It's crazy.
Ridiculous. Okay, so how did you're absolutely right earlier with the aliens comparison. About halfway through this movie, it turns from a pretty fun romp. We got Charles Dance turning up, revving up his penis and stuff like that, into a pretty by the numbers kind of space survival, almost horror. It's not really horror because it's still pretty lighthearted, but there's a definite sense of threat, and it's definitely more kind of actiony and scary than it was previously. How did you find the design of the robots and like that section of the movie?
I thought it was okay. I think I would have maybe. I know it's quite made in 95 for a very low budget, 96 for a very low budget. But I think I didn't really like the effect of just show the alien's head and then show something exploding. I wanted something to like some sort of change of a color of light, some sort of light beam, some sort of like. I like that they didn't do like a digital light beam because it would have aged terribly. But something just I don't know.
The close up on the face with a like sound and then just like half a limb falling into screen. It works maybe once or twice, but after that, it's like, okay, you needed a little bit more than this, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I tend to agree with you. I think although I thought the design of the robots was quite cool and the sort of physical performance of the actors in the suits, I enjoyed. Although not robotic in the slightest, I will say they're like moving around like fucking Jack Skellington. It's like, who designed these to move this way?
No, you know what they're like? They were saying, the guys who designed them, they were just like, right, so they've got like hoofs for feet, right? So they've got like literally tiny feet. There's no way anyone believes they're human feet. So you can perform these however you want. No one's ever going to think these are human because the feet are clearly not human.
They're like bound, like ballerina feet to be constantly performing a plie. Not a plie. My ballet knowledge has abandoned me here. I don't think it is a plie. The one where they go up on the toes. You know the one I'm talking about. Okay, so we have to talk about this now. Have you ever known a movie to end the way that this movie ends? And by that, I mean they turn up, reveal that the Earth government has been privatized by the villain anyway, so they didn't need to stage the military coup. Therefore, the whole movie was a waste of everyone's time, and then they accidentally blow him up. Did that feel satisfying to you as a consumer of this movie, or did it leave you wanting more?
You know, I liked it. I like the whirlwind ending of the guy from the start coming in, and I like, you know what I loved? I loved the delivery of the line where he said something like, the government's gone private, and then it sort of leaves a beat, the camera is sort of moving off him, and then he goes, and it's about time to, or something like that. You know? It's
just so grim, the ending. And like this is something they surely should have hinted at, like just a little kind of cutaway scene somewhere in the middle of the movie, rather than the guy you haven't seen since the beginning of the movie just turning up in the final scene and being like, government's private, didn't need to worry about the robots, don't worry about that, here's some money, and then it turns out the money's booby trapped and they chuck it out the window and it lands on his car and blows it up. It just like it is the hallmark, and I think it's deliberate. I think it is done deliberately because the whole movie's like hammy like this, but I think it is deliberately like someone was writing all night and it got to like 3 a.m. and they needed to get this thing in at 6. They're like, shit, I've got like an hour before I need to leave. I've got to finish this. And they just blitzed through the final scene. They're like, I've got to end this now, and then handed it in. And that's what they came up with.
I understand. I'm doing my dissertation at the minute, and the last 3,000 words have just been, I'm not even going to show my advisor. I'm just getting these on the fucking paper and handing it in.
Yeah, that's the spirit, and that I believe that is the spirit that Ted Mann wrote that finale in, because it feels like it's like I need to get everything into this scene somehow, and it needs to sort of make sense.
I might pop that in my dissertation. Actually, just end it with and then a briefcase of money exploded. Just add that in the end.
Just slip it in one paragraph from the end, just to see if they're still paying attention. And I mean, it can only improve. It can only improve your grade. Let's be honest, because who doesn't love a sudden explosion, even in literary form?
Space truckers.
Exactly.
Yep.
If they're a fan of space truckers, they'll bump you straight up to a first for the inclusion of that.
So do you know the story of the name Space Truckers?
No. What's the story?
So apparently, like, I can't remember which actor it was. It might have been Stephen. I think it was Stephen Dorff, actually. Yeah. So basically, his agent, whenever they came to show his agent the script originally before Stephen Dorff got involved, his agent said, "Don't like the name Space Truckers. Stephen Dorff will not be involved if we use this name." They were like, "Okay, no problem. Doesn't have to be called Space Truckers." So they called it like Irish sci-fi film or something when they were filming it. And then when they finished wrapping the whole film, the director said to Stephen Dorff, "Well, what do you think this film should be called?" And his answer was Space Trucker. And that's why they called the film Space Truckers again, because his agent said he didn't like the name, but Stephen Dorff actually came up with it again of his own volition.
Oh, nice. Okay, but do you think they had? Do you think Stuart Gordon had someone like following Stephen Dorff around through production, just kind of whispering Space Truckers?
Yeah. Like Darren Brown. He employed Darren Brown
just to implant the message. But it was his idea. He needs to.
Stephen, I need you to turn this book to page 744. What's the third word, Stephen? Space Truckers.
Stephen Dorff was incepted for this movie. We can all We can all agree upon that.
Inception 2. Oh my god, that's a great film. Inception 2, incepting the name Space Truckers into Stephen Dorff's head.
Ken Watanabe stuck in Stephen Dorff's head, just like, we were young men once. Anthony, what would you give this movie out of 5? You haven't seen it before. We got to rate it. Remember that half stars are for cowards. Where do you land on Space Truckers?
Now, I was tempted just to meme it up and say 5. I was, but I think that would be a disservice to the sanctity of the BMPE. So, I've been very honest every week. Now, there are no retrospective changing, I will say, but I think I am going to go 3-star on this.
Okay, yeah.
I think I am. I really enjoyed it. I really did.
I went the same. I went into this. I honestly came into this being like, I remember hating this movie when I was 10, and I watched it, and I was like, this is bad, but I'm enjoying it. And then it got to that Charles Dance scene in the middle, and I was like, this is fucking great. I don't care what anyone's talking about. Like, I don't know what 10-year-old me was. I don't know what was up with the 10-year-old me, but this is a great scene. And it loses momentum towards the end, but I was on such a high from those early scenes that it carried me through. So yeah, 3 for me as well. Yeah. Right, okay, well, I mean, that's going to lead us quite naturally then into answering one simple question, as we always do, and that is, Anthony, what is your favourite movie this week?
It's got to be the one and only Irish science fiction movie, Space Truckers.
I think that's a fair shout. I went for The Fifth Element because I'm trying to be arty and cool. Those of you who are fans of Stuart Gordon will be excited to hear that beginning next week, it's the spookiest time of the year. And we'll be kicking it off with another Stuart Gordon classic. I won't do the Ghostly Whale next time, I promise. Reanimator, one of my favourite horror movies, is what we're going to look at next week. So look forward to that. It's an order. Thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song. You can find links to their stuff down in the thing below. Check out their other stuff. And thank you to you for listening. Please consider subscribing. We are the Culture Cave on YouTube, and we're the best movie podcast ever on podcasting apps. Get involved in the comments, give the show a like. It really does help. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
Rest in peace.
Yeah!